The American truck market, long dominated by power, pride, and price tags pushing $70,000 and beyond, has just been shaken to its core. GM, yes, General Motors, just admitted something that most automakers would never dare to say out loud. For years, they told us that rising material costs, advanced technology, and consumer demand justified their sky-high truck prices. But now, it turns out, that wasn't the whole truth. What GM just revealed behind closed doors, and then reluctantly confirmed publicly, could explain exactly why prices on their trucks have suddenly crashed. And this revelation is sending shockwaves through the entire auto industry. According to insiders and recently leaked internal data, GM quietly discovered a problem that was impossible to ignore. Their inventories were overflowing, and their so-called premium trucks were piling up on lots faster than they could sell. The Silverado, the Sierra trucks once considered the gold standard, were now sitting unsold for months. And here's where things get really interesting. GM's internal data reportedly showed that many of these trucks weren't being bought by loyal customers at all, but rather by fleets and rental companies just to keep sales numbers afloat. The real demand from everyday buyers had fallen off a cliff. Consumers were done paying luxury prices for what they saw as inflated value. So when GM finally admitted the truth that their trucks were overpriced and demand had collapsed, it wasn't just a casual statement. It was damage control. They were forced to slash prices across dealerships, sometimes by tens of thousands of dollars, just to get inventory moving again. The real reason prices crashed wasn't generosity or a market correction, it was survival. And now, that move has set off panic among competitors. Ford and Ram, who had been holding strong on their pricing strategy, suddenly found themselves under pressure. How do you convince customers to spend $70,000 on your truck when GM just admitted they've been overcharging for years? Internally, Ford is said to be reassessing its pricing models, while Ram dealerships have started quietly offering unadvertised discounts to avoid losing buyers altogether. For truck enthusiasts and buyers, this is a strange moment. It feels like the curtain has been pulled back on the entire industry. Many customers are angry, realizing they might have overpaid in recent years. Others are rushing to dealerships, hoping to take advantage of the sudden discounts before the market readjusts. Dealers, meanwhile, are caught in the middle, forced to explain to frustrated owners why the truck they bought last year for $65,000 is now being sold new for under $45,000. The ripple effect is massive. Used truck values are plunging. Financing deals are tightening. And automakers are scrambling to rebuild consumer trust after years of inflated pricing and overproduction. And here's the most shocking part. GM's admission might just be the beginning. Some insiders believe that other automakers have been sitting on similar data, showing their own truck inventories are dangerously high. If that's true, we could be looking at a full-scale price correction across the entire truck market, something we haven't seen in decades. Because once one major automaker admits the truth, the rest can't hide behind marketing slogans much longer. Now, what happens next, how this ripple effect could transform the pickup truck market forever, is where things get even more interesting. And that's where the story starts to take a darker turn. Because behind GM's public statements and carefully worded press releases, there's something even more unsettling. Insiders say this truth GM admitted wasn't some spontaneous moment of honesty, it was forced. Reports suggest that several dealership groups had started pushing back, complaining directly to GM that they were being crushed under the weight of unsold inventory. Lots were overflowing, financing costs were climbing, and dealers were losing faith in the company's strategy. In other words, GM didn't come clean because they wanted to. They came clean because the numbers left them no choice. And when those numbers leaked, the public reaction was immediate. Truck forums lit up overnight with angry owners demanding answers. Buyers who had financed trucks at record prices just months ago are now seeing the value of their vehicles nosedive. Some even accuse GM of misleading marketing, selling short supply illusions to justify markups that never should have existed in the first place. Meanwhile, independent analysts are digging deeper, pointing to what they call a pricing bubble that's been building for years, propped up by cheap credit and clever advertising. Now, Ford and Ram are watching this unfold like a slow-motion crash. Ford's executives reportedly held emergency meetings to discuss how to respond without triggering a similar collapse in their own prices. Ram, on the other hand, seems to be quietly adjusting cutting dealer incentives and pulling back on production targets to avoid flooding the market. But here's the catch, the consumer confidence damage is already spreading. Buyers aren't just questioning GM anymore. They're questioning the entire pickup segment. If GM's prices were inflated, what about everyone else's? Dealerships are feeling the pressure more than anyone. Some are offering record-level trade-in bonuses just to move old stock, while others are slashing prices on used models that have suddenly lost 20–30% of their value. Sales managers describe it as a free fall with no clear bottom. Even longtime GM loyalists are hesitating to buy, waiting to see if prices drop further or if other automakers will be forced to follow. The trust that once fueled this market, that sense of pride in owning a big American truck, is starting to fracture. But there's another side to this story that almost no one is talking about yet, a hidden layer buried deep in GM's internal data. Analysts say there's a clue there that might explain why this all happened so suddenly, something that could change the way people look at the modern truck market entirely. Because if the data is right, this isn't just about prices crashing, it's about a fundamental shift in what consumers want. And GM may have just accidentally revealed it to the world. And that revelation, if true, could be the most disruptive part of all. According to those who've seen fragments of GM's internal analysis, the company discovered that a growing number of buyers no longer prioritize raw power or towing capacity, the very qualities trucks were once built and marketed around. Instead, consumers are shifting toward efficiency, technology, and affordability. In other words, the traditional definition of a pickup truck is starting to crumble. GM's own customer surveys reportedly showed that younger buyers, especially those under 35, viewed large trucks as impractical and financially unrealistic. That's a dagger straight to the heart of an industry that spent decades selling size and strength as status symbols, and GM's executives couldn't ignore it any longer. The company realized it had been building bigger, heavier, and more expensive trucks, while its next generation of customers wanted the opposite. But by the time they accepted that reality, it was too late. Production was already maxed out. Inventory had piled up, and prices had inflated far beyond what the market could sustain. When interest rates rose and the economy tightened, the bubble finally burst. The truth GM admitted was less about pricing and more about identity. Their trucks no longer matched what buyers wanted. Inside GM's headquarters, this triggered what insiders describe as a quiet panic. Teams were reportedly pulled into late-night strategy sessions, debating whether to accelerate the rollout of electric and hybrid trucks or double down on traditional models to maintain brand loyalty. Meanwhile, dealership executives were pressing for immediate answers, warning that if GM didn't act fast, they'd lose customers to Ford's Lightning or Ram's next-gen lineup. But the deeper problem was clear: the trust damage couldn't be fixed with a rebate or a discount. Across social media, the backlash kept building. Truck owners started comparing depreciation rates, posting screenshots showing how much value their vehicles had lost since the start of the year. Others shared videos accusing GM of knowing about the oversupply long before the public did, claiming that the company manipulated production numbers to keep investors calm. Whether true or not, the perception spread fast. And once public confidence starts to erode, it's almost impossible to rebuild. Meanwhile, Ford and Ram are quietly trying to position themselves as the honest alternatives, but even they're walking a tightrope. If they admit similar issues, their stock prices could take a hit. If they deny them and get caught later, the fallout could be even worse. The industry as a whole is treading on thin ice, and behind the scenes, analysts believe this could be the start of a larger reckoning across the entire auto market, one that could reshape how vehicles are priced, built, and sold in the coming years. And while the automakers scramble to protect their reputations, there's one question that still hangs in the air, one GM hasn't answered yet, but will have to soon. If this truth they admitted is only part of the story, what else are they hiding behind those boardroom doors, and how much longer before it comes out? Because some of the leaked reports hint at something far bigger than just falling truck prices, something tied to their production strategy and how GM plans to quietly shift the entire market without anyone realizing until it's already happened. And that's where things start getting even more suspicious. Multiple sources close to GM's supply chain have hinted that the company's next move isn't just about lowering prices, it's about restructuring the entire way trucks are built and sold. The leaked memos suggest GM has been planning a large-scale manufacturing shift toward cheaper components, cost-cutting in interior materials, and even outsourcing some assembly to third-party facilities. On the surface, it's being framed as efficiency improvements, but internally, some employees are calling it a desperation move to save margins as truck profits collapse. What's even more revealing is how these changes connect to the company's EV strategy. Buried within those same reports are notes about GM redirecting billions in resources away from traditional gas-powered trucks and into the Silverado EV, a model that's been delayed multiple times and quietly scaled back from its original production goals. It's almost as if GM realized that to survive the truck price crash, they'd have to bet everything on the electric future, even if it meant alienating their most loyal customers in the short term. But here's the twist: that shift could be happening much faster and more secretly than anyone expected. Dealers have started noticing small but telling signs. Orders for certain V8 trims are suddenly being cancelled without warning. Inventory shipments are being delayed or redirected to specific pilot regions. Even suppliers have reported last-minute changes to part orders, suggesting GM is retooling some plants earlier than publicly announced. All of this points to one conclusion. GM isn't just reacting to a price crash, they're trying to quietly reinvent their entire truck strategy before the market realizes how deep this problem runs. Meanwhile, buyers are picking up on the unease. You can feel it in the comments sections, the forums, the dealership conversations. Longtime GM fans are asking whether the trucks they love are about to disappear, or worse, be replaced by models that look the same but feel completely different. And competitors are circling like sharks. Ford is reportedly ramping up marketing for its next F-150 refresh, emphasizing heritage and trust, while Ram dealers are pushing aggressive loyalty deals to lure disillusioned GM owners away. The entire truck market has turned into a chessboard, with every automaker trying to predict GM's next move before it reshapes the game entirely. But perhaps the biggest clue that something huge is coming lies not in what GM has said, but in what they haven't. Certain executives who usually appear front and center in media briefings have been conspicuously silent. Public statements are vague, investor calls are carefully scripted, and when reporters press for answers, the company deflects with talk about market adjustments and consumer value alignment. Yet, according to insiders, there's a classified presentation scheduled for internal stakeholders next quarter that could finally reveal GM's full recovery blueprint, and if what's being whispered about that meeting is true. The entire truck industry might be standing on the edge of a transformation no one's fully prepared for. And that internal presentation, the one that's got everyone from executives to factory workers on edge, is rumored to include something that could shake up not just GM, but the entire foundation of the American truck market. Some insiders claim that the document outlines a radical plan, a controlled reduction in gas-powered truck production, paired with the aggressive rollout of a new modular platform designed to serve both electric and combustion models. In plain English, GM might be preparing to phase out traditional trucks faster than anyone imagined, replacing them with a single adaptable chassis system that could pivot between EV and hybrid powertrains on demand. Now, that might sound like progress, efficiency, innovation, modernization, but here's the catch. Such a move could quietly eliminate thousands of jobs across supplier networks, dealerships, and assembly lines that rely on the complexity of current truck production. Fewer unique parts, fewer specialized workers, fewer independent dealers needed. And the timing of this revelation, right after GM admitted to inflated truck prices, feels too coordinated to be coincidence. It's as if they're clearing the stage, wiping the slate clean, before introducing a totally new era of trucks that they can market as the future, without ever acknowledging how we got here. Dealership owners who've caught wind of the plan are reportedly furious. They're saying GM is using the price collapse as cover to restructure the entire retail chain, moving toward direct-to-consumer sales, cutting dealer margins, and centralizing control of pricing and distribution. Some even suspect this price crash wasn't just a market reaction, but a planned reset, engineered to justify lowering production and shifting public perception. After all, if consumers already think truck prices are out of control, they'll welcome anything that seems cheaper, even if it means losing the options and customization that made GM's trucks iconic in the first place. Meanwhile, investors are split. Some are calling GM's move visionary, a bold pivot toward the future. Others are terrified that the company's trying to do too much, too fast, in an already unstable market. And the internal data supports that fear. Truck demand, particularly for high-trim luxury models, has fallen off dramatically. The average buyer isn't walking into showrooms with $70,000 anymore. They're walking in with $40,000 and a long list of doubts. Interest rates are up, wages are flat, and consumers are cautious. The perfect storm that fueled GM's dominance, easy credit, pandemic-era demand, and inflated trade-in values is gone. But even with all these warning signs, GM seems determined to push forward. Reports suggest prototypes of a new mid-size hybrid truck are already being tested under a codename that hasn't been used in decades, a callback to one of GM's most trusted names from the past. Some say this is their attempt to win back skeptical buyers with nostalgia. Others think it's a marketing distraction to steer attention away from what's really happening behind the curtain. Either way, the stage is set for a massive reveal, and the auto world is holding its breath. Because if GM's next announcement confirms even half of what's being whispered right now, it could redefine not only their future, but the entire identity of the American pickup itself. And that's exactly why so many people inside the industry are nervous, because if GM is truly preparing to redefine what a pickup truck is, then everything we've known about this market is about to be flipped upside down. Imagine a future where the Silverado or Sierra name still exists, but the trucks themselves are lighter, quieter, maybe even smaller, designed more for efficiency and lifestyle than heavy hauling. For decades, GM's trucks have symbolized toughness, capability, and blue-collar strength. But now, whispers suggest they're shifting toward a different kind of customer, one who values tech features, digital dashboards, and fuel savings over torque and towing. That's not evolution, that's a cultural shift. And the tension inside GM's own ranks is growing. Longtime engineers reportedly hate the idea. They've spent their careers perfecting engines and drivetrains built for power, not for plug-ins and range meters. Many of them see this new direction as abandoning GM's roots, the very DNA that made their trucks legendary. Marketing teams are clashing with product developers, finance departments are demanding cost cuts, and executives are walking a tightrope between appeasing investors and keeping the public from realizing how deep this transformation really goes. Meanwhile, out on the lots, the change is already visible if you know where to look. Dealerships are quietly receiving smaller shipments of high-end trims, the Denalis, the High Countries, and more mid-range models loaded with tech but stripped of old-school performance options. Sales reps are being trained to push efficiency and comfort instead of raw strength. Even the brochures are changing less, talk about horsepower, more about driving experience and connectivity. It's subtle, but it's there. And buyers are noticing. On social media, people are posting side-by-side comparisons of the newest GM trucks versus older models, pointing out thinner metals, lighter frames, smaller fuel tanks. Some are excited, saying it's about time the industry modernized. But loyalists? They feel betrayed, convinced that GM is turning its back on the very people who built its legacy. And the louder those voices get, the more pressure builds on GM to respond. Because if this shift is as deliberate as it appears, then the company isn't just chasing the EV trend, they're rewriting the rulebook for the entire truck market. But what's really making analysts raise their eyebrows isn't just the design changes or the price drops, it's what's happening financially behind the scenes. Sources claim GM is preparing to restructure certain assets tied to its truck division, a move that could involve quietly offloading some of its most historic facilities. The reason? To free up billions in capital for what's being described internally as Project Recode. Nobody outside GM seems to know exactly what that means yet, but insiders say the phrase has been popping up in internal memos, engineering schedules, and budget documents for months now. And after months of speculation, the truth about Project Recode finally came to light, and it was even bigger than anyone expected. GM wasn't just planning a refresh or a small technological update. They were preparing a total reboot of their truck division, a clean slate. Project Recode, as it turns out, was the internal codename for a sweeping transformation, designed to pivot GM's image from a legacy truck maker into what executives are now calling a mobility powerhouse. The goal wasn't just to build trucks for today, but to create a platform that could outlast the next decade of uncertainty, one that would merge electric, hybrid, and even hydrogen powertrains under a single, modular design philosophy. In simple terms, GM wanted to erase the line between traditional pickup and future tech vehicle. It's a bold move, but it comes at a cost. The transition means thousands of existing models will be phased out, long-running trim levels discontinued, and even some plants, the heart and soul of GM's truck legacy, will be repurposed or shut down entirely. Internally, some executives see this as a necessary evolution. But for the communities built around those factories, it feels like the end of an era. Workers who've built Silverados and Sierras for generations now face uncertain futures, replaced by automation and EV-focused assembly lines. The public reaction has been just as divided. Some hail GM for being honest, finally admitting that prices were unsustainable and that the market needed correction. Others see it as manipulation, a calculated confession to justify a massive corporate reset. Either way, the result is the same. GM's trucks, once untouchable symbols of American reliability, are now at the center of a storm that could reshape the industry forever. Ford, Ram, and even Toyota are scrambling to keep up, cutting costs and rushing out hybrid alternatives. Dealers are pleading for clarity, buyers are waiting on the sidelines, and investors are watching every move GM makes. And through it all, one thing has become crystal clear. This wasn't just about a price crash. It was about control. GM's admission wasn't a mistake. It was the first domino in a plan to rebuild their empire from the ground up. By exposing the flaws in their own pricing and supply strategy, they effectively reset expectations, making it easier to introduce their new generation of trucks at what will appear to be reasonable prices, even if they're quietly redefining what those trucks are. So, when we look back years from now, we may not remember this as the moment GM's truck prices crashed, but as the moment they hit reset on the entire industry. A calculated confession, a storm of backlash, and a new direction forged out of chaos. Because make no mistake, GM didn't just admit the truth to apologize. They admitted it to prepare us. The old truck market is gone. The new one has already begun.